Welcome to the latest Tablet podcast. My name is Ruth Gledhill and I'm the assistant editor. And with me again is Liz Dodd, my former colleague, who is now a nun, a sister with the community of St. Joseph of Peace. Welcome, Sister Liz. It's so
Thank you
lovely
very
to
much.
have you here again.
Thanks for
And
having me.
and it's really fantastic that you're a guest on this podcast, and I know it's been getting some traction recently. Is this actually the first time we've spoken since the election of Pope Leo? Because, well, we've both just been so busy with our various lives, and we'll hear a little bit about your busyness in a minute. You have written a really interesting column about your reaction to Pope Leo. I know listeners will want to go and read that right away, and you can subscribe to the tablet at thetablet.co.uk/subscribe. But that's the advert over. So, Liz, what was your reaction, and how do you feel about him now? Because I think you kind of slightly changed your position, didn't you, once you got to know him a little bit better?
That's right. I think, like I say in the column, my first reaction was sort of unbridled shock because, as we've been talking about before, I ended up being on a talking head on Sky News after the White Smoke had happened, and I thought I was just going to go on and kind of fill space and talk about what's happening now behind the scenes. And then I was just poised to go on when suddenly there was a commotion on the balcony in Rome and we realised whoever the Pope was about to step out. So a producer popped up in my ear and said, hold on, wait for him to come out and then we'll cut back to you and you tell us who he is and what this means for the church. And I was like, okay, fine. And in my head, I was still thinking, it's this soon, it's going to be Parolin or it's going to be Tagle. Exactly. And then this man walked out. You said that the tablet editor, Brendan, had been tipping Pope Leo for a while, but it completely passed me by. So he walked out and I thought, what? And I was still on the Sky News, the studio feed. And it took them, I think, a moment to sort of translate what was being said and the name. And I've still no clue. So luckily I had that edition of the tablet with all the sort of papabile cardinals in. So I was flicking through it. I had minutes. And it's funny what sort of jumps out at you at a moment like that. I was like, okay, he's an Augustinian. He's served in Peru for a long time. He's American, like he's from North America. And you're sort of in that moment threading all this stuff together to have some kind of coherent opinion, because of course for the interviewer on Sky, they were like, what does this mean for women in the church? And I was like, well, don't know. But I think what came across even in those first few seconds was that he was, I'm going to use the word synodal cautiously, that he was a listener. He was in Rome for a long time without making any enemies, which means that he's obviously very diplomatic. So my initial response was, I think they've chosen someone quite safe who probably won't rock the boat on some of the issues that I really do care about. And you always can know this is going to happen. There were those days when people started raking through his history, when he was in Peru, when he was in North America, and some comments were coming up, some quite difficult things he'd said about LGBTQ people, and I started to think like, oh no. And then the reaction on social media, it felt like because of some of the things he'd done, like moving back into the Apostolic Palace, wearing the mozzetta when he first came out, quite a lot of like more traditionalist Catholics were saying, oh, we're going back to the sort of Benedict XVI papacy. So for a while I was a bit like, oh dear. But, very slowly, I think I'm learning, first of all, you can't, and it's unfair to judge someone on their first 2 weeks in the role, but a lot of people who I trust and like seem to think a lot of him. So that's encouraging. And the sense I get from the tablet is that you're very encouraged. Is that right?
We're really, really happy. I mean,
Yeah.
it was very funny for us because, as you say, Brendan Walsh, the editor, had tipped Robert Prevost, but he, like Prevost himself, had thought they would never elect a US cardinal, that it was impossible because there was already too much geopolitical power in the hands of America, so they wouldn't want a pope. And that's quite an interesting conversation all of its own about why they might have done that, given that fact, and where, as a result, we can speculate that Prevost stands in relation to Donald Trump and what's happening in America. But it was in the evening, and I'd come into the office because I'd had a feeling it might be that day he was chosen. But when the 4 p.m. went by, there was no white smoke, I thought, well, it hasn't happened and it's not going to happen. And Brendan was kind of getting ready to go home on his way out of the office because we'd finished for the day. And then suddenly everything exploded. The phones started ringing nonstop and everything lit up on my screen. And there was white smoke. So I screamed out in the office, white smoke, white smoke. And so Brendan immediately ran upstairs to alert our CEO because, it had implications for our schedule at the tablet and so forth. But then he watched him come out and we both, me and the other people in the office, and we all sat there thinking, who's like you did, who is this? But Brendan knew who it was right away. And he said, it's Prevost. And we were just kind of completely gobsmacked. But it was the best thing. And, it's been like, we've been so happy in the office afterwards. We feel he's so perfect. And, the things he's said already, like he wants to be a bridge, symbolise unity, and the way he's, promoting, or looks like he's going to promote synodality and fulfilling the legacy of Francis, which we supported, of course. He does, to me, feel like he's going to be a really good thing, and calm things down as well, but continue the progress that Francis kind of pioneered or led a little bit. So it has been really good. But I'd just like to say to listeners that one reason, I hope you don't mind me saying, one reason Sky contacted you to go on was because they'd listened to this podcast. You were such a great expert. So that's fantastic.
It's an exciting time, a conclave in the election of a pope, because suddenly the Catholic Church is really foregrounded. And I don't know if you find the same thing, that there's sort of a week or 2 weeks when every time you turn on the TV, it's someone you know. Just briefly, our niche has this moment of like real visibility that's so exciting. But I think what you were just saying about Trump and Pope Leo is so important, and something that I'm really trying to unpick at the moment, because part of what makes me question my own guardedness is that I'm like, maybe that's exactly what we should be feeling, in a sense. What's so clever about this choice is that we have a pope who hasn't immediately alienated conservatives and traditionalists in America. In fact, even some of those sort of fringe edges of social media seem quite happy with him. And simultaneously, he's carrying people like me, like the tablet, people who care about social justice and things like that. Now, if he can do that, if he can keep particularly the whole North American church together, that sort of more liturgically conservative and social justice minded, both those sort of aspects of it, he's a real counterpoint. I nearly said threat, but I don't think that's a smart word to use, but he's a real counterpoint to Trump. As soon as he steps too far in one direction or the other, that plays into Trump's hands. If he suddenly talks too much in the wrong way about migrants or immigration or stuff like that, then all those MAGA Catholics will just say, he's a woke lefty, So the fact that I'm not bursting with enthusiasm for him, I think is probably quite right, because it means that he's doing what popes are supposed to do, which is to hold the whole church together and not necessarily be the pope for a fringe interest group like me.
I feel he is doing that, actually, holding the church together in the tablet. Someone you will, of course, remember from your time at the tablet, Abigail Fryman-Rauch. And it's about the Latin Mass and Traditionis Custodes, and, what's happened, the whole development of that whole story to where we are today. And, of course, there are big hopes on the traditional Latin Mass side that he will restore the Latin Mass to the place that Benedict gave it. Do you have any thoughts on that, or how he might handle that? Because I think we have indicated in the tablet also previously that this might turn out to be one of the biggest tests of his papacy, or certainly one of the earliest, biggest challenges he faces.
I've seen those same indications that I think Abigail talks about, that he might have a more relaxed attitude towards it than Francis. Whether that's a sort of theological position or just a sort of synodal thing, he doesn't want to tell parishes in places where he's never been how they should and shouldn't worship. I don't know. I love it because it challenges me in a way that very few parts of the church challenge me, which is that you can be liturgically really conservative and choose the Latin Mass over your local parish Mass, and yet still be a sort of social justice Catholic worker type, because that's exactly who Dorothy Day was.
Even in the Church of England, the Anglo-Catholic the original Anglo-Catholics, way back when, were the people who really worked in the inner cities and the deprived areas, and they were the ones fulfilling the social mission of the church, and going out there filling in the gaps in society, because we didn't have a welfare state then, and filling in the gaps and helping people who were really on the margins and falling by the wayside, falling through the net. There wasn't really a net to fall through, but they were helping those people, and those were the people on the traditional Catholic side of the Church of England. So often it is that traditional side where some of the really hard social justice work is done.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's really important to remember. Now, that said, during the conclave, and particularly the inaugural Mass, you get a real sort of taste of that. I mean, it's not the traditional Latin Mass, but like the inaugural Mass, for example, you get that big institutional pontifical celebration, and it is almost exclusively male. 3 hours, because I was doing Sky again at the end of the inaugural Mass. But by the end of the however long it went on, I was like, this is ridiculous, and I think you could see, I hope, elements of Pope Leo in there, in that I think the first reader was a woman and she read in Spanish. But it really is grudging. It feels like 3 hours of this, and because of the way the church is built, the first few hundred people in the congregation are all just awful.
And you, in your column, you talk about the fact that one of his first, if not his first appointment, is a woman, and she's a woman religious, but someone who doesn't wear the veil.
That's right. There was a big outcry on X. You can tell I've got back in too much into social media with all this conclave. I'd sworn off it, but I'm back. So I'm found again. Forget TikTok. I'm going back to the old days. There was a huge outcry about him appointing her as she's secretary for the dicastery for religious, because she didn't wear a habit. And then I looked into it and I was, no, she does wear a habit, but her congregation's habit, veils are either optional or they don't wear them, which just seemed so offensive to some commentators. And it reminded me that during the inaugural Mass, the person who represented all religious, I think I'm right, apart from the Jesuits, in welcoming Pope Leo was Sister Una, who's the head of the Superiors General, just been appointed, and her congregation doesn't wear a habit. And the outcry about that, somebody said something really spiteful, like, oh, it's a shame she didn't dress with respect to meet the Pope. And I was like, she's wearing a suit. Like, what more do you want? And there is, I talk about it in the column, there's this pernicious thread that still exists in that part of the church that says women have to dress a certain way, nuns particularly have to dress or look a certain way. And it's sexism, it's misogyny, like outright. Yeah. So I love that Pope Leo has just shown that that's not even in the back of his mind when he's making appointments.
And he can't possibly support that kind of attitude towards the way women dress. I just can't imagine that he can't be part of his way of thinking.
No, but I was surprised by how widespread and normal that view of religious women is. I've done events where somebody has said to me, would you wear your veil at least, or something? I'm like, I can't. My congregation discerned not wearing a habit in the 60s, so it's not even up to me. I can't make this decision just for you, because we as a congregation have discerned not wearing a habit. So it would be to go against my vow of obedience, in a sense, if I pitched up wearing one. But it's a fairly mainstream reaction for people to say, oh, well, this is a formal church event, so would you please? No!
All my working life, since my 20s, when I got into writing about religion, I have been subject to abuse from men who judge me by the same standards that they might apply to an enclosed nun. It's only men, occasionally women, but mainly men. And as soon as Twitter arrived, of course, the abuse kind of multiplied tenfold, 100-fold. And just endless. And I even had someone the other day, as if working for the Tablet, as if someone like me shouldn't be allowed to work for the Tablet because of things I might have done in the past.
No,
No kind of understanding at all of how
no,
reconciliation works, or
no. Well, or how the rest of the world works.
yes,
So I can't tell you the number of times I've had encounters with people. And one last week, someone came to the door um, selling something. And when they realized that we were sisters, wanted to have a conversation and some prayer and all that kind of thing. Um, this person was quite young. And I don't think they would have gone into some of the things they went into if I'd been sort of other or wearing a habit. Now, I know lots of sisters who wear habits who I adore and who are missionary and joyful and inclusive and all that kind of thing. But I think there is also a space for women like my congregation who just, you might sit next to us on a bus or in a cinema and have no idea. And that's how God works, isn't it? Like God sit next to you and you
absolutely.
have no idea. You don't need to dress a certain way or act a certain way to be holier.
No, no, it is funny how important it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, you are about to embark on some travels, aren't you? Are you going to Rome?
I'm going to Rome tomorrow. I'm
We're going to meet
completely
there, Leo.
unprepared. And talk about missing the moment. I'm sort of 2 weeks late, really, but I'm going for a gathering of an international group of younger religious called the Leadership Collaborative, and we have I think it's an annual, maybe every 2 years, but we have a big international gathering where we all come together, and I love it because it's a chance to be with younger sisters, and it's very free form. So we don't sort of go in, and it's not like a retreat. There's not like tons of input. There might be a little bit of guided input, but then there's loads of space just to go off and have conversations and decide new things, and amazing stuff comes out of it. Like people will get together and say, do you want to start a house of hospitality on the border with Mexico? And off they go and do it. So I'm really excited, and it's a great chat. We're not based in Rome itself, we're just slightly outside, but I'm going early to have a bit of time in Rome and going to do all the holy doors.
Oh, well
Gonna,
done.
yeah.
Fantastic. The year of Jubilee.
Yeah, do a bit of sort of Vatican tourism. Maybe see if we can get to one of the audiences, but I think for me it's going to be too hot. I'm a bit of a weakling when it comes to standing in the bright Italian sunshine for hours, so I might be under a column somewhere with an Aperol spritz, watching from afar. But yeah, that's going to be great. And then traveling afterwards with some of my American sisters, which is going to be really great. So
Where are you going with them?
we're going to Assisi and Siena. So I'm really excited for that. I haven't been to Assisi for a long time, but I'm hoping we can go to a place called Laverna, which is in the kind of forested mountains near Assisi, and it's where St. Francis received the stigmata. And I think it's the most tangibly holy place I've ever been. It's really strange. Even the memories I have of being there as a teenager are of the air feeling different and very emotional. I'm looking forward to going back now and seeing if it feels the same way.
I've always felt the same about Jerusalem.
Really?
Yes, in Jerusalem, I've had some extraordinary experiences in Jerusalem, and but it's the air. Something about the air just does feel so different there. I mean, there's a thing called Jerusalem syndrome, isn't there, where people
Yeah, all have life-changing
yeah,
experiences.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I completely know what you're saying
yeah,
about that, and I've heard people say the same thing about Lourdes and Medjugorje. Because of the
yeah.
death, I was meant to be going to Lourdes, as you know, this year, but because of the death of Pope Francis, while I was about to get on the plane, I
Oh,
never got there. But I'm really looking forward to going back next year with HCPT,
yeah.
which I think
Oh,
will be their 70th year of
wow,
pilgrimages for the children. So that was going to be
wow.
great. So you were telling me before about Chicago and how
Yes.
Chicago is a center of religious learning. And so I was interested in what influence, if any, you think this might have had on the young Pope Leo, Robert Prevost.
That's a really good question. So, it's kind of tied into this event I'm going to, because the last time I met these sisters was in Chicago, That was where our last gathering was, because Chicago has become this kind of focus point for, it's not even fair to say liberal or progressive because those are such loaded words, but just thoughtful Catholics of all kinds of liturgical and social and economical persuasions. But I think there's a place called the Catholic Theological Institute, CTU. That can't be right. Anyway, CTU, which is this fantastic Catholic university, is based in Chicago. And that really brings in academics, students. It's where a lot of young sisters, brothers do their early theology training as well. So that makes it a very exciting place to be a Catholic. And it's such a cool city as well. It's like, it's got that amazing sort of jazz scene woven into it, contemporary music, art. It's right on the lake. So you have this, and I know this must exist in other places, but it always feels so American to me, this sort of huge view of all these skyscrapers all kind of curling round the lakeside, and then the water just going off into nowhere. It's amazing. And I think something else that has stuck in my head about people from Chicago, I wonder what this says about Pope Leo, the climate there varies like nowhere I have ever been in my life. So I went twice last year because, as I say, it's a real kind of hub for Catholics in the US. The first time I went, it was minus 30 degrees.
Wow.
In English money.
True.
It was because they had one of these like beast from the east snowstorms coming in. So it was so cold you couldn't really walk outside. And then the next time I went, which was only a few months later in the beginning of the summer, it was 40 degrees, plus 40 and over. And people were going out and jogging. And I was like, I said to my taxi driver at one point, like, how do you even have clothes to exist in this like minus 30, minus 40s up to plus 30, plus 40? And he was just like, you just get used to it. Like, that wasn't even that bad. So people from Chicago are tough. People from the south side of Chicago are tough. And that's Pope Leo.
Yeah.
And
That's
tolerant
true,
of
yeah.
difference.
Yeah, I completely get that. I've been to Chicago a few times and I absolutely love it. And I love walking by that lake and walking.
Oh,
I was there a couple of times before I converted to Catholicism, and I went and prayed in the Catholic cathedral there, you know, for guidance and just sat. And I remember feeling this, this incredible sense of peace and rightness. And it's wonderful to see images of that cathedral everywhere, when Pope Leo
yeah.
was elected.
I
Um,
love I love that you said that, because there's a letter in, I think it's this tablet, a very accurate and right letter from our wonderful former tablet deputy editor, Eleanor Curti, taking issue with something I'd said in the anniversary edition. And it sounds like a good line, and I think it's true that the way the church is changing is that we'll meet less in churches and cathedrals in the future and more in council flats. Then Eleanor rightly said, I don't think that's true, because there's something holy about a cathedral. And the English Catholic Church and the American Catholic Church has beautiful cathedrals that will always draw people in. And I read it and I was like, yeah, she's right.
So both could be true.
Yeah, and I think local communities will meet in different ways and spaces going forward. But I think she was right to highlight, and as you've just pointed out, there's a particular specialness to going into a cathedral space.
There is, and it's a place. I always find that a cathedral, because I used to pray in Westminster Cathedral quite a lot, years ago, and I always found that I've always felt that my prayers were answered, and that things went not necessarily the way I wanted, but in the way that was right afterwards, and just letting oneself go to the prayer, and to "Thy will, not mine, be done," to that sentiment. And I find a Catholic cathedral, with its quietness and its lack of busyness, is that the Catholic cathedrals are uniquely placed to provide that kind of environment when that kind of reflection and prayer is really possible.
And there's a sort of inherent aspect of pilgrimage to it as well, isn't there?
Like, totally, absolutely, because you kind of set out to go there, and then you go there, and you're walking on foot. It is absolutely like that. So you mentioned people jogging in the streets of Chicago. Yes.
You can tell it's right on the top of my mind, can't you?
So this lunchtime, I hope you don't mind me saying, before we did this podcast, when I had my lunch break, and I assume you had yours from your work as a nun, um, I was on my bike doing a race on Zwift in our shed because I'm working from home today, and you were out running. So we both have kind of embraced a fairly active lifestyle to cover the periods of our life when we're not kind of, sitting or praying or whatever it is we do or writing. For in the rest of our lives. And one of the things that really endeared Pope Leo to me was the discovery that he had a personal trainer. But not just that he had a personal trainer, but that this personal trainer had no idea he was a cardinal.
Yes.
And this chap who was coming in, suddenly he's the Pope. What did you make of that? I mean, wasn't it wonderful though that he has a personal trainer, and that this is like John Paul II was a great fitness guy too, wasn't he? Remember, he used to ski everywhere.
I think it's wonderful, and I think I particularly admire the fact that he hadn't let slip that he was a cardinal, because when your job is also your identity in some ways, like being a priest or a cardinal or a nun or whatever, it's quite hard, or a journalist, when your vocation is your identity, it's quite hard not to talk about it. You have to have a real roundedness to your personality, I think. Because I fail at it all the time because I'm new at this whole religious life thing. So sort of every now and then I'll be sort of to a physiotherapist or something. I'll be like, "Oh, I'm a nun," and you're like, "Well, I didn't need to say that. Like, why you don't care?" But I think it's just because I'm growing into this, so I'm still not. I don't have that kind of personal growth yet, but I think it says a lot of Pope Leo that he has so much going on in his life and he's such a normal person.
Yeah, he's so relatable, isn't he?
Yeah, that he was, and I mean, I think you have a coach, and you'll have worked with personal trainers. Like, you build quite a close relationship with someone like that in your life. So for Pope Leo to have maintained that as a normal person without one day saying, "Oh, I've got to go to Rome because I might end up being the Pope," is great. That actually, I think, says a lot about him.
Yeah, yeah. So I know you're raising funds at the moment in a running kind of race event.
That's right.
For Gaza.
That's right. Yeah, my coffee shop is doing a sponsored run to raise money for medical aid for Palestinians, and I run recreationally, and I run fairly long distances, but I didn't think I'd sort of place anywhere I would be anywhere near getting a medal in this competition. Slowly, I've just become obsessed. And now I've run 106 miles, I think now, and I'm closing it on the top of the leaderboard. So the run that you saw me on at lunchtime was much more of a sort of sad hop because I have sprained my calf muscle, but I'm so close to the end that I'm just sort of limping around, and it's I love running. I find it very prayerful and meditative, particularly if I'm having to go a bit more slowly than I'd like to. But with something like this, raising money for people in Gaza, everything I'm seeing on the news through my social media is so horrendous. The images of children, people fighting for food, the idea that starvation is being weaponized. I always need something physical to be able to process it. I can't just have those images, and I find movement helps me to pray as well. So in a way, it's been a gift to me to be able to sort of run through some of it.
And it can be like pilgrimage again, can't it? Because there's a kind of destination in mind, and it is a wonderful way to clear one's thoughts and to kind of open one's spirit up.
Yeah. And I think you become very receptive to God, or at least I find that, particularly a long way into a run, sort of over sort of 10, when you're getting into that sort of 2-hour, 3-hour length of time running, you drop a lot of your guardedness. So things like a beautiful cloud or the way the sun is hitting water or something like that become quite overwhelmingly beautiful in a way that they're not if you're just sort of going to the shops or going to the bus stop. So
yes, absolutely, definitely.
So that's 106 miles of prayer I've run. this month. When I get to Rome, that'll be it.
And in terms of asceticism as well, I find sometimes, when I'm properly working out and exercising or training, um, I think fasting then can come into it as well in a way that can be completely in step, as it were, with a religious discipline of fasting. And I find that a really good mindfulness practice.
I think you're right. But funnily enough, in almost the opposite direction. So I'm reading a book at the moment called Physical Education, which I think I saw a review in The Guardian. It's about a woman who discovered weightlifting and how weightlifting and sports undid a lot of the myths that she had been told about women's diets and women's size and things like that.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah. I must
you
read
found
that.
this as a pro. It's a wonderful book,
What's it
and
called
I think
again?
it's called Physical Education.
I'm definitely going to look that up. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry I can't remember the name of the author, but it's a beautiful book. As someone who grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, constantly barraged with this idea that skinny is better.
I know.
Something that I think is coming back with these weight loss jabs. The idea that you can eat to fuel yourself and eating more is sometimes good is for me almost a sort of inverse fasting that I'm learning by running sort of 40, 50 miles a week. I can't function as a person and a runner unless I feed myself. And as a woman, sometimes that's really difficult to believe. And as an athlete, I think it's difficult as well, because you constantly think if I was smaller, I'd be faster or da, da. But there's a line. And for me, a really interesting part of this journey has been that you need to feed yourself to be able to keep, and I think that's true in all of our lives, but particularly for women.
You're so on point with these remarks because my attitude to this has completely changed. Because like you, I was bombarded throughout my youth really with the kind of propaganda that thin is better. There's nothing tastes as good as skinny.
Skinny feels, yeah.
Kate Moss quoted that. I'm not sure if she said it originally, but she certainly is that is attributed to her. And nothing feels as good as skinny. Yeah. Recently, my coach insisted I went and did strength and conditioning. So now I go to weight training classes, which my husband just loves the fact that sometimes in the morning before work, I'll go off to weights. He thinks it's really funny, and it is quite funny in a way, but everyone's big. They're not fat, but they're big and strong, yeah. The women as well as the men. And also on Instagram, I've discovered this woman who's a world champion weightlifter called Rebecca Strongwoman. And I follow her on Instagram, and her journey is absolutely fascinating. She's a young woman, and she comes from what I can make out, she seems to come from a background where she's had real, there were real issues that she's had to deal with. And now she's kind of become this world champion, and there's these incredible videos of her lifting weights. And she's my role model, I just admire her so much. And look at my muscle, Liz. Look at my muscle.
Oh, look at that, amazing. As a runner, I've got none of that.
So now I don't want to be skinny anymore. I want to be big and strong,
Exactly.
That is my new goal. And so now I have been exploring diets to manifest this, and so now protein is all the thing for me. Protein.
Tell me about it.
Yeah,
as a vegan, this is it's so difficult to get my head around.
I've been making chocolate cake with whey and no sugar with whey because I found online some really great high protein chocolate cake recipes.
Fantastic. I just eat blocks of tofu. That's all bit, and it all came off the back of this injury. I went to see when I first hurt my calf, and I was wondering if it was something more sinister that I couldn't run through. Part of the recovery was eating and what to me seemed obscene number of calories with a certain amount of protein. And the physio said to me, you're not trying to lose weight at the moment. You're trying to run these stupid distances while rebuilding your right leg. You've got to eat for that. You can't, it's not going to happen by accident. And I think it's so interesting, going back to what we were saying at the start about women and their role in the church and what Pope Leo seems to think about women's leadership fits, I think, with this, that women don't all look or feel or want to be the same. There are women who wear habits and don't lift weights and don't run, and there are women who run hundreds of miles at a time and win cycle races on their lunch breaks. and we're all part of the same church, and we all have
Yeah.
the same right to leadership and prominence as anyone else.
And for me, you know, the physical education and exercise type of thing, it isn't a kind of narcissistic thing for me. Where it comes from is, well, as you know, I got very unfit and to the point where I had quite a serious health episode. And coming back from that, I felt that it's, I do regard my work as a religious journalist for the tablet as a kind of vocation. No, not vocation, of course, but I do
It
see
is a vocation, yeah. It is.
vocation. And, I need to be fit and healthy to do it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's part of trying to ensure, maintaining health and, making the body that the God I was given by God to be as fit as possible in order to carry out that kind of work, that vocational work, and to be most effective at it. So to get good sleep and everything like that. And in a way, it's a starting point for then what you can then go on and do with all the mental gifts and intellectual gifts or whatever that one might have been given. So it's far more than just, do I look better this way or do I look better that way? It's a holistic thing to do with mental, physical and spiritual health.
Yeah, it is, which I think Pope Leo must understand if he's
Yeah.
got a personal trainer.
Yeah.
And I love it because you're in a long line of runners at the tablet. There was a reporter before me called Sam Adams who used to run every lunchtime and wash up in that downstairs bathroom. And then I inherited the bug, so I used to ran around the park near the office,
And then
and
you
then come back
cycled around the world. Let's not forget that.
But I love to think of the generation of tablet journalists who've gotten into running and have to like shower in that little downstairs bathroom before coming up to the office again.
Actually, yesterday we were just fantasizing about putting a proper power shower in there.
Oh, you should. There's room for it.
Yeah, that would be so wonderful. But
Yeah.
that's going to happen. But yeah, it would be great. But so, well, we must both run off now.
Yeah, I've got to go and do some rehab on my leg and pack for Rome.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear how it goes. So let's have another conversation when you get back.
Fantastic. Looking
And
forward
do
to
go
it.
to the audience because I'd love to hear what happens, and we'd love to have a picture of you meeting Pope Leo if the audience
It'd be
permits.
interesting to see. I haven't seen whether he goes round in a sort of sealed Pope-mobile or not, but it will be interesting to see what his style is compared to Francis.
Yeah. Did you meet Pope Francis?
Briefly in Istanbul by accident when I was there covering a trip for the tablet, and all the journalists I learned went and stayed in the hotel or spent the day in the hotel watching the feed and the translation there. And I thought, forget it, I'm going to go to the place where he's whatever it was saying the mass. So I stood outside and he walked out. And I had my phone up. It was ages ago, so it was a very bad camera phone, and I had my phone up because I figured he'd come out with a group and I'd be able to take a photo, and he just walked out with maybe one other person and just waved at me. So I've got this fantastic photo, which is mostly blur, but of Pope standing right in front of me going, I was just so shocked. So it wasn't really meeting him, but a lovely memory of being close.
Oh, well, good luck. I hope you have a wonderful trip. And
thank you very much. Thank you. I'll have more of a suntan the next time you see me, hopefully.
So thank you, Liz. And it's goodbye from both of us. And just to remind you, if you want to read more of Liz's adventures and of my reporting and of everyone else in the tablet and the wonderful stuff we have on arts and literature and features and comment, please do sign up. The website is thetablet.co.uk and /subscribe will take you to all the latest offers. Thank you for listening and see you next time.